Hi everyone, and welcome back to 7 by 7, the Tribal Habits video blog tackling the big issues in online learning. Today we're discussing ways to improve training completion rates. I'm joined by David King, the CEO and founder of Tribal Habits, who's going to give us his 7 methods to improve training completion rates. How are you today, Dave?
I'm good, Jordan. No pressure on me then, I guess, to come up with 7 methods.
Absolutely. Well, completion rates are one of the big metrics in the learning and development space. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people eager to hear what you've got to say on this topic. So let's dive right in. What's your first big point?
Yeah, cool. I should preference, I've obviously prepared 7. They're not all like, some of them are very practical things. They're all very practical, but some are like about training management. Others are about training design. So the first thing is, a lot of people think, if I can make the training more engaging, I will have higher completion rates. And to a degree, that's true, but often not for the reason people are thinking. So if you think engagement comes about by having the training look more amazing, look more schmick, look more professional, and that's going to lead to higher completion rates, you're probably wasting your time. And YouTube, I think, has settled this argument once and for all. There are so many videos on YouTube that have millions or hundreds of millions of views, which don't have particularly high production quality. People are engaged for completely different reasons. Usually it's to do with the relevancy or interesting content. And so engagement's definitely one thing, but it's not the only thing. And I often see particularly larger organizations just overinvest in the way their training looks. I mean, they fuss with every tiny little thing, thinking that the more fantastic they can make it with animations and colors and things, the higher the completion rate will be, only to a point. If there's lots of other things that can get in the way of completion rate, high completion rates, no matter how amazing your training looks.
Great. So let's talk about some of those other things. Where would you point people?
Cool. First one is timing for training. So you have to think about your learners and think about when you're asking them to do the training. So if you're asking people who are already seriously busy to come and do some training, it doesn't matter how amazing that training looks, they're probably not going to do it. Yeah. And so the problem here is the timing. And so we need to be thinking about, well, what else are people doing? How much time do they have to spend on training? Is this a busy time of the year? Has their team just won a big contract? Has they lost a staff member? So now they're all working extra hard. Do they have people on paternity leave? Could be any number of things. And often I think sometimes we sit in isolation away without realizing that. We push out some training, we don't get a big response, and we're like, oh, let's make the training better. But actually the timing was just off. Yeah. So that's where you need a good calendar, or to understand what's going on out in the organization, or with your customers. When you're asking customers to do training, do they have the capacity to do it, basically?
Great. And what else? There must be other things that can assist this as well.
Yeah, you can kind of think about it the same way in terms of picking the timing. You also got to pick the learners. So some people just aren't suitable for training or a particular topic.
Yeah.
And so that can be sometimes when you're asking someone really experienced to do some training that they feel is really basic, which is just a bad idea anyway. I mean, that's a great way to disengage staff. Or they don't have an opportunity to use the training. So you're asking them to do training, which to them feels like it has no relevance. It's like, what do I do with this information? Why am I learning it? I feel like I'm not going to use it. And as soon as they have that thought, they kind of tail off. And again, doesn't matter how fantastic looking the training is. If you haven't picked the right person, it doesn't matter. It's any product, no matter how spectacular it is. If I don't see the need or use for it, I'm just not going to engage with it.
Sure. And what other things can we do to set people up for success, maybe before they even take the training?
That's a good point. Let me switch the order here a bit and talk about that. So often when training comes at you out of the blue, it has some issues with some of the things I've mentioned. So you don't understand why you're doing it. You don't really understand why it's even being offered to you, or what's even in it, or the value to it. So a lot of that is how training is pre-positioned. So if you want higher completion rates, you need to be better at managing expectations. So that's that communication out to staff about, here's why the training is important. Here's the benefits you will get from it. Here's why we're asking you to do it now. to show some consideration of those things. And I think when that's positioned well with learners beforehand, now they understand it. And that could be their manager having their discussion with them in a performance management or one-to-one meeting. I've got some training I want you to do. Here's why. Or it could be an organizational mail out explaining the importance of this to strategic goals or other reasons they need to do it. So a lot of that is pre-positioning with people so that they've got the buy-in. You've got their buy-in before they begin.
So you did mention managers there. What role do they play in this whole process?
The critical role. I usually talk about managers as the key thing in training. They'll make or break training. And, you're not going to get high completion rates if managers aren't behind training. I see this all the time. The training department rolls out a big training thing, but managers of teams aren't properly prepared or informed or on board. And they're like, I know we've got some training, but it can wait. We've got to focus on this other stuff. And as soon as managers say that, the training's dead in the water.
Yeah.
So, managers need to be briefed, need to be behind it. And there needs to be accountability. And I would put the accountability with managers. I would say your team needs to finish this. Get them to finish it. Because people do what their managers say. So if their manager comes over and says, you haven't done this training, oh my goodness, your completion rates will go up. Yeah. Because the manager can empower them in ways when they come over and hold them accountable that a training department often can't. An email from the training department says you're overdue and you must do this is easily ignored. An email from your manager saying you're overdue and must do this is very difficult to ignore. So empowering managers and then making managers accountable dramatically boosts completion rates.
Okay, let's pivot to something a little more tactical now around due dates and reminders. What's the kind of best way to deal with them?
Yeah, look, if you want completion rates, you need due dates. It's like any task that's delegated. If there's no deadline, it never gets done. And it's very hard to complain about completion rates when you don't set a due date. Because a learner can easily say, well, you didn't set a due date. I didn't realize I even had to do it, or I'm going to do it when I'm good and ready. So that's where having due dates is important, and then having reminders built in. And so the due date needs to be appropriate for how busy people are and how long it's going to take them to do the training and how complex it is, etc. And then there needs to be a series of reminders. So in tribal habits, you'd set up a 14-day due date for argument's sake. You might send your first reminder 7 days beforehand, the next one 3 days beforehand, the next one on the day. And then the next one might be a week after it's due, and we'll put manager escalation on that one. Yeah. So that the manager gets notified as well as the learner that this person's well overdue. And if you've got then the manager going, why am I getting these emails? You get completion rates very high. And it sounds like a lot of emails to be sending, but they only get them if they haven't done it. So if they've done the training, they don't get any reminders.
Yes.
So there's really nothing to lose there. But yeah, you can't really have arguments about completion rates if you haven't done the basics with due dates and reminders.
Definitely. So any final points to close out on?
Yeah, look, I think, I've got just to close the loop and go back to that YouTube analogy. The thing that drives completion rates is relevant and useful training. Yeah. If I can see this training is going to benefit me and I understand how it will benefit me, it's relevant to what I'm doing now, the challenges, the opportunities that are in front of me, and it's contextualized to my organization. So it's not just some random bit of training from some massive training library that clearly was made outside my organization and talks about things that we don't do. If the training is relevant, completion rates are high. That's the YouTube thing. I watch things because I find them useful. They have engaged with me on a utility level, a value level. It isn't just how they look. So it really is a case of substance over form drives completion rates.
Yeah, definitely. I think that holds nicely with a few of the other things that you said there, where it's all about relevant content. It needs to be laid out well and appealing to a point, but you can continue to polish something beyond its worth. And it's not really going to help people or encourage people to kind of close the completion rate. There's also big jobs. Sorry.
I think that, it's got to look good, but that's just a hygiene issue. Of course It has to look good, but it only needs to look good enough.
Yeah. It's like
beyond that, every minute of extra time spent making it look better should have been spent on making the content better.
Definitely. And I really like the point as well about kind of prepping people for the training. Like so often I think with training, people are like, I don't really see why I'm doing this, but if you can tell the story beforehand, and we're doing this training for this reason and it's going to have this outcome, then people buy into it a lot more. So getting those expectations set in the first place is really powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is all we've got time for today. Tribal Habits is a really great platform for some of the stuff we've spoken about today around due date reminders and things like that. Obviously, a lot of today's discussion was around kind of cultural things that need to take place in your organization for this to be successful, but it is helped a lot if you have a really engaging platform that backs it up, and all the stuff we're talking about, due dates and reminders, can be automated so you can stop chasing people for training. So I'd encourage you to check out tribalhabits.com. If you want to reach out to Dave or I directly, you can do that through hello@tribalhabits.com. And we'll close out with that. Thank you very much.
No worries, Jordan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.